All right, so we've talked about creating alpha channels and then layer masks, vector masks within layers, that sort of thing. And so what I want to do now is go over selections. And actually, this may have been better to do first, but because we need to make selections in order to um, create those channels. So um, I'm going to go over selections, and then I think I'm going to try to integrate that with a little bit of color adjustment. So I've got an image here, um, which I'll put up on Brightspace in case you want to mess around with this. But really, the ways we make selections are there's several, and it's basically these three top icons on our toolbar. And I'm working right now in my Essentials workspace. So, where this is a selection tool or an artboard tool, here we've got our marquees, our lasso tools, and then lastly, object selection tools, which are somewhat AI driven. And there really aren't many AI things that I go over in Photoshop, but these definitely are because they do help. They just make a lengthy process a lot quicker. So, but you can't always rely on them. So we've got to know how to refine these and sort of fine tune them. And so we're just going to start. I'm going to actually start by going over to my layers panel, and I'm going to unlock this layer, and then so that I can kind of work with it and create a mask. And then I'm also going to just duplicate it a couple of times. So if I go here under the layer menu, I can duplicate this layer. It's just girl 1, girl 2, and girl 3. So let's make 3 copies for now, just so we've got different things to try. All right. So first off are the marquee tools, and basically, you're probably familiar with these already, but tap M on the keyboard will bring them up. Rectangular marquee, elliptical marquee, single row, and single column. So honestly, all I've ever really used here is the rectangular and the elliptical. If I grab an elliptical marquee, I can select, click and drag around. Say I just want to take the head or the bust out of this. I can click and drag around that, make a selection, and then I can move that selection around whenever I put the cursor back inside of the circle. So it probably seems somewhat basic, but it is good to know. The other thing is, and if I hit, let's see, I'm just going to click outside of it to dismiss it. If I hold down my shift key and click and drag around it, it'll make a perfect circle. Click back out here. And if I hold down my option key and my shift key and click and drag, it'll draw a perfect circle from the middle. So just remember that there's always shift key will always constrain to a perfect circle. Option key will always create the selection from the center, or from where you initially click will be the middle, and you'll draw out from there. So that's how we get perfect circles. Like I said, hold down the shift key, click and drag, hold down the option key, and you'll draw it from the middle. Add the shift key into it, and it'll constrain it to a perfect circle. So we can do that, and I'm just going to actually create um, a few circles here. And actually, if I go ahead and hold down the Shift key, I can draw another circle. If I hold down the Shift key, start to draw, and then release it, I can make that an oval. Kind of move those all around together. I'll hold down the Shift key again, drag and overlap. I can kind of, I can kind of make selections out of multiple selections like this. So I make all those selections. I come over here to my layer panel, take a look at this, and I can create a mask out of those selections that I've made. So I can kind of do an odd water droplet kind of thing or anything else I want. So, that works the same way with, the rectangle or any of these others, all right? So that's the first set. And I'm just going to turn that off and turn on the next one. So next we'll look at the marquee tools, and there are a couple here. There's a selection brush, a lasso, a polygonal lasso, and a magnetic lasso. So let's start with the lasso tool. With the lasso tool, we can click and just kind of drag a real rough outline around. And I'm just going to jump over here. Kind of difficult to do with a mouse, easier to do with a pen tool, I think, or with a pen tablet. But when I get back up here close to the end, I just let go and it makes that selection. And again, just like the others, if I hold down my Shift key, I can add to this selection. Let's see what else we got. What about this area in here? If I hold down the Option key, and again, this works as well for these marquee tools, but if I hold down the Option key and go in here, actually, let's undo that. Let's zoom in on this area. And I'm actually going to hold down the Option key and select this area. If I've got some areas that are just way too big, I can hold down that Option key and go ahead and cut in here and get a little tighter on some areas and just sort of gradually shape this up. I'm not trying to be very precise here. There are other tools that'll do a much better job for that. But if I just need a real kind of a rough outline on something and I don't need it to be precise, this is an okay, quick way of going about that. And, I can also rough outline something then so that I can go back in. So let's go back down. There's our layer here. I'm going to make a selection there. So I did that kind of rough. But then I can go back in with let's go grab a paintbrush tool. And it's pretty big right now, but if I tap the bracket keys, the open bracket key will reduce the size of my paintbrush. The close bracket key will enlarge it. If I right click, I can bring up the brush menu, and I'm just going to size this down a little bit, and I want to make sure that, let's see, that'll be soft. If I adjust I can adjust the hardness and the softness of the brush. Drag that far to the left will be soft. Bring it far to the right will be hard. And nothing's ever really that hard, especially fabric and flesh and that kind of thing. So I'm just going to kind of make this about 95% hardness, and then black and white here, I can go back in with the black and I can start fine tuning my mask. So I can make a selection this way. And sort of paint this out. I find for stuff like fabrics and whatnot, this is a good way to go about it, just because they all have kind of a soft edge anyway. And, using the tools is one thing, but it's also about, make sure you understand what it is that you're, isolating or trying to make a selection of. If, something with soft fabrics like this, my feeling is that a brush tool is the best kind of thing to do that with. If I'm outlining a car, say I've got a picture of a BMW or something, that has very hard edges, and I really don't feel like a brush tool is going to be the best for that, because brush tool tends to be, fairly soft. So in those cases, I will usually use a pen tool to try to outline a car. I just think it works better. And it works better, and I get an edge that's much more like the real world material of the object that I'm working on. So, I'm a firm believer in picking the right tool to do the right job. If you notice, one of the things I'll point out here, and I'm not going to outline this entire thing, but as I'm outlining this, I'm just kind of placing down points. And if I have if I hold down Shift key between clicks, like with my brush tool here, if I click here, hold down my Shift key and come down here, it will basically paint a straight line between the two times I clicked. So I can use that to my advantage in a lot of cases, just to sort of speed up the outlining of this. And the truth is, isolating images, making selections out of images is a time-consuming process, but you do the work that you need to do in order to get the results that you want. And if a good clean outline is what you want, because we're always working to do the best job we can, it just takes a little bit of time, and you got to go with that. So I could finish outlining this this way, but I'm going to stop here. You don't want to watch me do it, and there are other ones that are, other ways to do this that are a little easier and a little quicker. So, knowing how to use the paintbrush tool and manually outline is important, because even when we use the object selection tools, which are somewhat AI driven, they're not perfect, and we still need to clean them up. And the process that I'm using right here is the process that I need to use to clean those up. So, all right, so let's go ahead and move on. So I can go ahead and I am going to keep this. I don't want to trash this yet. So let's go ahead and turn this layer off, and we'll turn this one on. So actually, I forgot. With this lasso tool, we've also got our polygonal lasso tool, and it's the same kind of thing, except that it just draws straight lines, basically. And if I hold, but it works the same way as the others. If I hold down the Shift key, then I can do multiple shapes. So let's turn this off. Let's turn this one on, and hold down my Shift key. Let's go down here. Maybe we want to do this, and I'll hold down my Shift key. Etc., etc. We can then make a mask out of that. So I'm gonna do that. I think that I wish I would have, if I hold down my Option key, I'm going to trim this shape back a bit. And with my Shift key, that didn't work the way I wanted it to. With my Shift key, let's go this direction. So if you start a point and it's not going the direction that you want it to, you can always just hit the Escape key on your keyboard to bail out of it. And we can try this again. There. There we go. Do something like that. If I duplicate this layer and delete the mask, create some interesting kinds of effects and whatnot. So I did disable this layer mask simply by right-clicking on it and disable the layer mask. So I'll do stuff like that a lot of times just because it's second nature to me, but I'll try to point them out when I do them. So, so that's the duplicate this layer because I need another layer to work with. So that's the polygonal lasso. Click on this, let's delete that layer. And magnetic lasso is the last one. So one of these tools that's a little helpful, but you really, in order to make it work decently, I think you've got to be kind of close to the object. And what the magnetic lasso will do is as we click and drag along, it actually creates a path. Or, uses places little knots and tries to kind of stick to the object, but I don't know. One of these tools that I don't really ever use, but it is there. You just got to be really tight and really kind of specific, and again, I feel like there are now other tools. The thing about Adobe is they innovate and they add new tools, but they don't necessarily get rid of old ones. So you end up with a lot of tools that do the same thing, and some of them not as well as others because they're the legacy ones. So it's just a matter of really kind of picking the best tool for the job and kind of knowing how they work. But that's the majority of these. And then we can also do a selection brush, which will allow us to paint the area that we want to mask. And create a mask from it. But again, I've got what I feel is a better way of doing that. So we'll just kind of skip past that. So the last one is the object selection tool, quick selection, and magic wand. So, no, by the way, with the, I can paint an area that I want. I should have finished this. With this tool right here, the selection brush, I can paint the area that I want to mask. So let's just kind of roughly do this. And when I click away to a different tool, it'll turn that selection it'll turn what I painted into a selection. So, again, useful. Actually, I don't mind this tool really at all. But again, I usually just have different ways that I do this. So, um, but it is there if you want to try it. This is just, Option key will help you remove an area that you painted. So like I overpainted there. If I overpaint here, I can hold down my Option key, go back out here and clean that up, kind of erase it out. Always too, when you're making selections, always try to stay just a hair inside of the area that you want to isolate so you don't get those fringy dark edges. So this selection would give me the dark edge of the background, and I definitely want to kind of clean that up. So I'm just going to do that. And then go back in here and kind of, see, I kind of stay inside of the selection. So I can paint out an object that way, make my selection, and move on from there. So it's, I think you need to know the tools are there and know what they all do in order to make the determination of what works best for you. So let's zoom back out, and I'm going to move on from this tool. So like I said, if I click off of this, it makes a selection, and I can make a mask from that if I want to. So last but not least, the object selection tools. So like I said, object selection, quick selection, and magic wand. So let's start with object selection, because this is the one that I think everybody kind of likes. So if we select this and hover over our object, you see that it kind of roughly outlines it. This is simply to identify the area that Photoshop's going to look at to isolate. So if I determine, this is the area that I want, I'm just going to click in this area, give it a minute, and it outlines pretty nicely to the subject matter. And since we're working non-destructively, what I do like about this tool is I can do very quick masks this way, get a layout kind of composed, put together, and then once I've got everything the way I want it, then I can always come back and clean up my mask. So, I mean, you can tell right here, it doesn't really it missed some of the jacket. Over here, it doesn't do a super job there. Some of these areas look pretty nice, but some of them can use a little bit of work. But I really just need to sort of examine the entire thing. Actually, on this particular image, it did a pretty nice job. You could probably leave this, but I mean, it kind of misses the edge there. It does well in areas of high contrast. It does a very good job if you've got a lot of contrast. Black to white image, highly contrasting color. This particular image, though, is kind of why I like working on this one, is that it's very similar colors between the foreground and the background, and it makes it, so it's not perfect, and it just sort of underscores the fact that we really kind of need to clean this stuff up before we're done. So I'm going to spend more time with this one, because anytime we create a selection like this, we're going to want to create a mask. And we've got two object options up here. We can select our subject, and then we can select and mask. And there's a few hard edges. We'll make sure that it looks for hard edges within the image. I can sample all the layers instead of just the one I'm working on, which, I mean, there's no reason for that because I've got a pretty simple image here. But nevertheless, you've got that option. If you've got multiple layers and you want to select several objects at a time. Um, so, but what I want to actually work with here is select and mask. So if I click on this button, it will actually create a mask for me. It takes me into mask. This is sort of a mask mode. And you notice that the interface has changed a lot. I've got just a few objects over here to work with, and I've got this properties panel over here with a lot of different options. So here's what's really kind of nice about this. I can continue to mask out areas that this didn't do a very good job with and clean areas up. All right. So I'm just going to kind of go into a few of these spots. I'm going to clean these up a bit. Do that. Smooth that off. It does get, you can kind of see this red mask area. You can kind of see that it doesn't do as good a job as I initially thought. It's kind of rough. So I've really got to go in and pay attention to all of this. But you got to admit, this is a lot easier than the other methods I just showed you. So, but in order to clean this up, I'm using the techniques from the earlier, more complicated methods, right? So we've got to be able to, know how all that stuff works so that we can get the most out of all of the tools that we're working with. So if I come down here, all right. So we can clean that up that way, just with these. And then I want to show you a couple things over here. So this is the way I prefer to work with it. I'm using, if I come up here to my view mode, you'll see that if I click on this arrow right here, there's a bunch of different options. I like this overlay. It gives me the red overlay of my mask area so that I can easily see, and it's screen, it's like a 50% screen. I can easily see the areas that I need to fix and the areas that are being masked. So I know there are areas in here that need fixed, I know there are, areas, over here that need cleaned up. So, I'm looking at it through a red onion skin, kind of. But there are other options here, and you can find the one that works best for you. Marching ants simply gives that marching ants selection outline. Onion skin will actually screen the background image behind it. So instead of the red, I'm looking at this onion skin. I can put it on black. Black and white actually shows how that black and white mask looks. And then on my layers, so if I had other layers behind it, I'd be seeing through those. So I like working with this overlay. It's just me. That's the first thing. Some of these other things down through here. So I've got the ones I work with the most are, and I'm going to zoom in on an area up here just so we can see if we can kind of see what happens with some of these. So smooth will allow me to kind of smooth out that edge. So if it was kind of, and I'm not really I see a little bit of a difference happening in here. I crank that way up, it's kind of smoothing that off. If you watch that edge, you can see what happens to it as I move smoothing. It's kind of pulling it inside a little bit, which I think is probably good. Keep that low. The second one is feather. So feather is nice because it'll allow you to feather your mask quite a bit. And if I go over here and I look at this as on layers, you'll see that it's really softening the entire edge, which is probably not what I want, but it can work. What I do want to do with this though, I mentioned before that nothing is really perfectly hard and crisp unless it's a metal surface, but even then depth of field will kind of throw some of those edges out. But if nothing else, I won't set, unless it's an effect I'm looking for, I won't set a feather value this high. But I will set it to like 0.5 or 0.9 because nothing is ever absolutely perfectly crisp. And I don't want any of my imagery to come off this way. So whether I'm using this tool or whether I'm making a selection and maybe, um, you know, making a selection and then maybe feathering the edge of it, um, I'll always feather about a half a pixel or so. If it's a really, really big image, I might go as high as a pixel. It depends, but. So anyway, that's feather. And then contrast. You see how that, as I slid contrast along, it's really kind of hardening that edge up, but if I go all the way to the end, it's kind of getting a little sawtoothy. You can see that there, so which is too much. Contrast is something that I generally don't mess around with too much, but maybe we'll do something like that. And the last one is shift edge. And I do find this one useful because, like I said, you always want your selection to be a little bit inside of the object, you know, pixel or two inside of the object that you're isolating, just so you don't get those ugly, dark, frilly edges. So shift edge will, if I slide this to the negative side, it will pull my mask inside of the object that I'm outlining. That's too much, but maybe I shift it let's try minus 30 or so. But see, that kind of brings it right inside the edge, which is kind of what I want. So I can fine tune this mask, you know, for quite a while here, and get it just the way I want it. And then, see, one other thing I want to do here real quick is, excuse me. Yeah, I'm pretty much just working with black and white here. So, I will refine some other things later, but there are a couple other settings here to refine hair and that kind of thing. If actually I don't really have hair to mess with here, so this will be okay, but I'll just kind of clean some of that up. All right, so I've actually done a fairly decent mask here, and once I'm done, I'm just going to click OK. Gives me my little marching ants outline, and then with this selected, I'll go down here to my layer masks option, click on that, and that will create that layer mask with all of those refinements that I just went and put into it. So there are a couple little areas I want to mention here real quick. I'm going to grab my last magic wand tool. Probably familiar with this. This is an old school tool. It's been around forever. But I'm just going to select sort of inside of this lens because we see the background through it. And actually, I don't like that very much. With the, let's see. I didn't really want to save. Let's actually change the tolerance on this to, let's try 48. And Command D will deselect that area. So 48 just gives a much larger selection. Let's drop this to 24. Command D. It's a little bit better. Not great. You know, I think that for everything I just did, I'm actually going to just paint this in. So on this layer mask, I'm actually going to pick, I don't want it to be totally transparent in here, I don't think. I'm just going to give it a little bit of gray so it picks up a little bit of the surface of that lens. Zoom way in here. kind of use this dark gray to just going to really roughly do this. Do the outline, fill in the middle. Drop this down a little more. And I can certainly clean up these corners. But that will give, you know, that's just a really dark gray, but what that'll give me is, if I come down here to my, let's come down here to my effects, and I'm just gonna add a solid color of dark blue. Actually, let's make this so we can see. If I give it a yellow there, you can see that we can sort of see through, now we can see through that lens because I used a dark gray rather than black, but I do get a little bit of tone in it that alludes to the fact that there's actually glass in there. So, you know, when we're masking, we just need to kind of do all those little things. So drag this down here and turn it off. And if I want to go back into this mask and work with it some more, all I gotta do is select the mask, come back up here in my properties panel, select and mask takes me back into that area that I was working in, and I can continue working with it. So kind of continue cleaning up and continue isolating stuff. Remember that when you're, you know, doing this, you know, white or black is transparent, white's opaque, and then grays are varying levels of transparency, basically. So that's why when we use a soft edge brush or we feather an object to create a mask, we get that soft edge in it. So do that, say okay, so we've got her all taken care of. And I can always bring, you know, let's say I grab this and bring this image back, and I want to delete this layer mask. Let's just go ahead and get rid of all of these because I don't need them anymore. All right. So we've isolated her. And, you know, that's most masking. We can, you know, there's a select menu where we can select everything, isolate layers, but we don't really use this. I don't use this all that much for the most part. One thing is worth pointing out, if I select this, you know, say escape, what did I do? Okay, cancel. So if I select my mask, turn that off. So if I select my mask, I can go to the select menu and I can invert. Where's invert? If I hit Command I on my keyboard, it'll invert my mask. I mean, keyboard is what I always use, but invert is apparently under the image menu. I use it so little that I forget. So, but, you know, you can invert masks that way as well. You know, so we've got a lot of stuff we have to outline, you know, for our exercises. And, you know, these are some of the ways that we create masks. So the last one I'm going to show you here is, let's duplicate this layer. And I'm going to go back up here, and instead of object selection, quick selection tool, let's just delete that layer mask. All right, so the quick object selection tool, you know, what I used before was the object selection tool. This quick object selection tool is more of a brush and allows me to paint areas to mask. And it does the same job as the other, it just kind of overshot there. But you know, I can paint through this and select everything that I need. And if I go too far and I overshoot, like in here, if I hold down my Option key, I can remove those areas. All right. So, and that's, you know, once I get this all, you know, everything's selected that I want here, that, get this. And once I've done that, I can select and mask, and I'm back into the same dialog that I had before that I just reviewed. And I can still, you know, utilizing these tools, I can still mask these areas, but that is how all of that works. So I'm just gonna, you know, I already have a good mask of her, so I'm not gonna go much further with this, but you know, when you're done, say okay. So, and then you still have to remember, create your mask. So these quick actions, this is actually a decent way to isolate too sometimes, except that it actually does remove everything. But it adds it to the mask. So there we have it. So our marquee tools, our lassos, and then our object selection tool. And this object selection tool, like I say, it's usually my go-to. It's good for doing a really quick mask. Just know that, you know, you can't just make the mask selection and leave it at that. You do have to refine it and fine-tune it. So, but you know, that's just part of what we do. So the one way I didn't cover, only because we talked about it the other day, is the other way to make selections is to use the pen tool and to actually outline an object. Like I said, something like this, I probably generally would not use this method, but on something like a car, I definitely would, because those are hard metallic surfaces. I've got somewhere here, I've got an image of a fighter jet. I would use it on that. It just gives us a much harder and much crisper edge to our masks that we don't get with a brush tool. no matter what we try and do. So use the right tool for the right job. And those are things that you can notice at the end. It's amazing the number of times I'm actually able to pick those out whenever I'm looking at an assignment or the work someone's done. So keep that in mind. It's just the right tool for the right job. So go ahead. Go to Pexels or something like that. I'll put this image up so you can work with it a little bit. See how you can isolate it. And then the nice thing is that once we get these all masked out, then we can start playing around and doing different things with other elements. Such as I've got the girl isolated, but let's say now I don't want the background to be blue. I can come down here to my adjustments layers, and maybe I pick an HSB hue saturation and start adjusting. Maybe I want that to be darker blue or more of a green, maybe something contrasting, more orangish, maybe something like that. And when we zoom in on this, we'll see the things we didn't do very well with. Like I didn't do very well along here. You see that sort of halo? Really need to clean that up. So, stuff like that makes the difference all the time. Some of these areas look a lot better than others, but not bad overall for such a quick adjustment. So, anyway, as we, kind of work through color corrections and stuff like that, and we'll use masks to color correct areas. So, you see this HSB has a mask attached to it, so I can mask things out. Maybe I'll do that here real quick, just to show you. Select that, and oops, I had the wrong. Maybe I want to make this real soft. And I can have the orange not affect the lower half of, I can use the mask to mask out areas of color correction. So, but we'll talk about that more when we talk about color correction. So, all right. Good luck with selections.